Hello 7-6, this is your third week looking into the dystopian project. So this week we're going to explore in a little more depth what sort of settings you might find in dystopian fiction and compare two different settings in two different extracts. What I'd like to do to begin with is a do now for 5 minutes. I'd like you to think of the answers for these three questions here. So question 1, what is an antonym for dystopian? Remember, in the keyword section here on the right, we've got an antonym is a word that's opposite in meaning to another. So if your antonym for black would be white, your antonym for cold would be hot. So what is your antonym for dystopian? We looked at that in last lesson. Or maybe even lesson 1. I think it was lesson 1. Your second question is to think of 3 synonyms or words that are similar to dystopian. And then if you'd like to have a go at the challenge, what kinds of settings can you think of, so environments, surroundings, that we associate with dystopian fiction? Maybe have a quick look at the images below, just as a guide to give you somewhere to start. So pause the video now, 5 minutes, having a think about those 3 questions, and then restart. Okay, so hopefully you've restarted. So your antonym for dystopian is utopian, which is a world where everything is perfect, people live happily. So that's very much the opposite to a dystopian world. 3 synonyms for dystopian. Now, when I googled this, because it is quite a hard one, so I'd imagine you have had to Google it, the only 2 that kept coming up were apocalypse, which we have here, or something called cacatopian. So what I did instead was put words similar to dystopian, or words describing a world's end, or a world where things aren't great. So some of the words that we came up with there, so maybe you managed to find these 2. We've got an anti-utopia, so the opposite of utopia, apocalypse, a catastrophe, an Armageddon, a battleground, also a Holocaust, the Holocaust. So obviously the Holocaust persecuted a race. They were seen as very much worse than the other race that were persecuting them. They had all their rights taken away, they were killed, they lived in awful circumstances. So the Holocaust could also be, viewed as a dystopian world at the time. What kinds of settings might we find in a dystopian world? So did you come up with an urban, polluted, decaying area? Did you come up with urban areas that lacked resources, maybe high rates of crime? Did you come up with a world or a country where the leaders were very tyrannical and domineering? They controlled all elements of our life. Did you come up with a setting where people were segregated by their location regarding as to what class they were or what race they were? Did you find that the natural world was also falling apart? Were we experiencing lots of wildfires and floods? Maybe lots of the vegetation was dying, the ice caps were melting. The real variance of what a dystopian setting might look like, and hopefully you managed to come up with some of those. So we've got something here. The choice of setting is extremely important in a dystopian novel. Remember, a dystopia is a place where normal life is very different to how we know it. It might be post-apocalyptic, perhaps after a nuclear war or a worldwide pandemic, an extreme famine or starvation, an alien invasion. It could be a society where the government or single leader has total control. Now, the writer's choice of setting, it can almost act as another character. In a dystopian novel, it creates the expectation of an impression for the reader of what might happen to the protagonist, so the main character. So very often the setting that they are in a dystopian novel has a direct impact on the main character's life. Or it might help them to sympathise with the character's suffering that they're going through. So we're going to have a look, as I've already said, at 2 different examples of dystopian settings in fiction. So I'd like you to read through this first extract, which you've already looked at, from There Will Come Soft Rains, and then draw the setting that you see in your head into your book. It doesn't have to be perfectly neat. Just something that gives the detail and the key bits that are mentioned. Now, I'm not going to sit and read this through this time because I have a really sore throat this week. but I would like you to sit and read it for yourself. So this is the extract here. Now you can either read it from the screen by pausing, or I will also attach this with the other extract onto Go, so you'll be able to access it there. So if you read through this and then restart the video. Okay, so what images did you draw in your books? Did you draw the clock? Did you draw this house that appears to be empty? It has all these things going on inside it, but no one living there. Did you draw the exterior wall, which has got the silhouettes of the people that were there but are not there anymore? Did you draw the sprinkler that came on? So hopefully you drew the image of quite almost, could you say, spooky, foreboding house that you can see once had life, but now life as we know it now isn't there. Now your second task is to look for and highlight or note down any language features used by the author that describe the setting. Now you might want to look for personification, repetition or similes, and then if you want to have a go at the challenge, look for some alliteration. So if you remember, personification is where you give human qualities or characteristics to an object or an animal. Repetition is a word that's repeated more than once for a purpose. A simile is a comparison of two things using the word like or as. And then alliteration, which is repetition of a first sound or sounds in a group of words. So I'd like you to pause again, look through the extract of There Will Come Soft Rains, and see if you can find any of those four things. Either note them down or highlight them. Now I'm going to have to pause the video now, but when we come back we will have a little brainstorm of what you might have found, and hopefully your answers tally up with some of mine.